Hi everyone, I'm Leanne and I'm going to be reviewing all of the books that I read in November. So I feel like I've just sort of disappeared off the face of the earth. Like the end of November to now has just been honestly a bit of a fever dream. So I'd mentioned that I was going to Edinburgh to celebrate my 30th birthday. I did. That was so fun. Loved it. And then immediately afterwards, I got so sick. So I had a few days in Edinburgh, had a great time, went to Dublin, was there for a few days and was just sick the entire time I was there. And to be honest, I have been sick ever since. I'm still not like 100%. So I'm hoping that, by the time Christmas comes around, I will be okay. But we don't have long to wait now. Also, for those of you that are interested, I did go for the TV in the end for what is going here. Lots of you were in favor of the projector, but it ended up being that a TV was just more practical. And my boyfriend's family were getting rid of a TV. So I got a free TV and that kind of just solved the conundrum. But now I get the lovely aesthetic fireplace background that I always admire when other booktubers have. So I have around, I think 14 books to talk to you about today, but I'm going to start by talking about some adult thrillers that are such a surprise for my reading year. I'm going to be talking about these more when I do kind of end of year reviews of my entire reading, because this author has come in at the 11th hour and just been such a standout of my reading year. But one weekend I was visiting my boyfriend and I'd managed to forget to bring books or my Kindle with me. I normally bring my Kindle so I don't need to carry loads of stuff, and I just forgot to bring it. But I really wanted to do some reading, so what I decided to pick up were books that his mother had been really trying to press into my hands, and I had been resisting because obviously I have so many unread books that I own. I didn't want to be distracting from trying to get through those books with borrowing books from people. But the circumstances called for me borrowing books. I needed something to read. So I started reading Frida McFadden. I read The Locked Door, I think like Saturday or Sunday morning, and I literally read it cover to cover in one sitting. And then the next day on the train back, I read Do Not Disturb cover to cover in one sitting. And being able to do that, to just feel so immersed in a novel and read it so quickly, brought me so much joy. I genuinely couldn't put either of these books down when I was reading them. And I'm going to be so transparent from the outset when talking about these books. Do I know if they're good? No, I don't know that. I don't read enough thrillers to really be able to assess the quality of thrillers. Do I think they're that realistic? Probably not. All I can tell you is that experience of reading a book cover to cover in one sitting. I'm not going to let anyone take joy away from me on that front, okay? If you think Frida McFadden's books suck, I don't care. I really just want to binge all of her books now. I should probably tell you what these two are about, to be honest. So this is about a woman who is a surgeon, but she has got quite a hidden past because her dad was a serial killer. She's really tried to run away from that past. Nobody knows about it. And then one day, the police get in touch with her, want to speak to her, because one of her patients has been killed in a very similar manner to how her dad treated his victims. And the story spirals from there. And then Do Not Disturb is about a woman who has committed a crime and she is fleeing from the scene. She gets in her car, she's trying to drive away from this crime as quickly as she possibly can, but a snowstorm derails that plan. And she finds herself staying in this quite strange motel where things are not all as they seem. What I really liked about this one was that you heard from multiple points of view. So you're kind of reviewing the events that you thought that happened from a different perspective. And also what I really enjoyed about this one was there was kind of a side mystery to the main mystery that towards the end I was like, but what about this thing that we don't know about? And then it's resolved. And I found that very satisfying. And to be honest, that's all I have to say on these. I don't particularly want to engage with them in any kind of critical way. I just really want to enjoy being able to blitz through a book really quickly, to feel thoroughly entertained. Will it wear off as I read more of her books? Maybe, but I'm going to ride that wave as much as I can. I also read Ordinary Saints by Niamh Ní Mhaoláin. This is a proof copy, but the final book is out now. It came out back in April, I think. And this is about an Irish woman who is living in London with her girlfriend when she hears word that her younger brother, who years previously passed away, is in the process of being ordained as a saint in the Catholic Church. And that premise is used as a jumping off point to explore lots of really interesting topics around the intersection of Catholicism and Irishness and queerness and family, all topics that, as someone who's really interested in Irish literature and is really interested in queer literature, all of those intersections are things that I'm really fascinated by. I think so many Irish families have, I mean, I'm sure these things exist in all families, but I do feel like there's often a particularly Irish angle to kind of unspoken feelings and conflicts within families, the relationships between grown-up children and their parents, the role of Catholicism in Ireland, the conflicts between queerness and Catholicism. I thought the author did a really amazing job of dealing with the intersections of all those topics, and they are topics that are, you know, becoming increasingly well-trodden within Irish literature, and I think she brought a slightly different perspective, or a more nuanced perspective, than some other books that I've read that deal with these topics. One of my favorite qualities in writing is when an author gets really specific about certain things, and those specifics is what lends the book a sense of universality. So if you are interested in any of those topics, I would really recommend this one. It's certainly one of my favorite Irish books that I've read this year. Then I also read Hecate by Nikita Gill. So this is a retelling of the story of Hecate, the Greek goddess, told through verse. Nikita Gill is best known for being a poet, but this is a verse novel. I really enjoyed this. As someone that doesn't have a huge amount of knowledge or understanding of the Greek gods and goddesses, I can sometimes find with retellings there's a lot of kind of contextual information that I don't have, and I certainly didn't feel that with this one. I feel like to say it's like entry level to Greek myth does it a bit of disservice. But what I mean by that is, if you aren't someone that is very knowledgeable about that topic, there isn't any barrier to you enjoying this story. Because I have a lack of knowledge on that front, I can't really comment on its kind of accuracy or its position within the canon of kind of Greek retellings. But what I can certainly comment on is the author's use of that verse format. She is a poet that I've always really enjoyed her work, and I thought it was really interesting to see her doing something that is more narrative than individual poems, and I think she did a really great job of that. Nikita Gill is doing more Greek goddess retellings, so I'm really excited to read the next one. I'll definitely be reading it when it comes out. And I think because I had such a strange reading month in November, in that I was just so incredibly busy, it was really fantastic to have something in verse that I could read quite quickly. I also read an adult non-fiction book, and that was The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates. Laura Bates is an incredible feminist writer. I've read a number of her books over the years and have found them so valuable. I've also been very fortunate over the years to have spent some time with Laura, and I just love all of her work, and she is such a great person. And when I heard she was writing this book, I was instantly like, this is the non-fiction book of my dreams, or in many ways perhaps my nightmares. And I say that because of the subject matter. In this book, Laura is exploring the role of AI, particularly in relation to misogyny and its role in the sex industry. As with all of Laura's work, this is so thoroughly researched. The amount of detail she has gone into is incredibly impressive, and the research that she undertook was so thorough, and the result of that research is so shocking and also really like heartbreaking to hear all about how AI without legislation is so dangerous, in particular for women. She goes into lots of topics around chatbots and how the way that users can interact with those chatbots in a sexual way can be really damaging for their approaches to those activities and topics. She looks at how AI impacts things like revenge porn. This is such a scary read, which is why I say in many ways it was a book of my nightmares rather than my dreams. But this is a topic that I have been really interested in for a very long time. And I think this is such a seminal work in terms of understanding the really dangerous ramifications of AI without proper legislation. This book is really a call to action. Like, this is something that we cannot be ignoring. Things have already gone too far. Like, it's trying to get the toothpaste back in the tube at this point, and governments and society are acting abysmally slowly in terms of making sure there is legislation in place to protect everyone. I would urge everyone to read this. I think it is so important, but I will say there are lots of difficult topics handled in the book, so do be aware of that going into it. And then a couple of books that I read for younger readers that I didn't read for work. The first of those was The Silver Arrow by Lev Grossman. So I read The Magicians by Lev Grossman many years ago, and I've reread it a couple of times since, although not in recent years. I think I read it when I was about 16 and then maybe read it again when I was 19, when I was 21. But then I haven't reread it since. But I do always think of that book as one of my favorites, if not a slightly problematic favorite. And I wasn't aware that he had written stuff for younger readers. So when I came across this one secondhand, I picked it up. And this is about a young girl named Kate who is given a steam train on her birthday. This steam train is called the Silver Arrow, and it whisks Kate and her brother Tom away for a magical adventure. So they go to a magical station where really unusual passengers board the train, and these animals have been waiting at the station for a very long time and really want to get home. And it is up to Kate to deliver them home before it's too late. I thought this was a nice middle grade novel. It definitely had lots of those really kind of magical, cozy feelings that you get from a magical middle grade. I can definitely see the animals being really appealing to lots of younger readers. And, you know, trains are one of those things that some younger readers get really fascinated by as well. So I can certainly see kids like that being really obsessed with this book. For me, I thought it was kind of a middle of the park one. I enjoyed reading it, but I'm not going to be wanting to return to it, but I did enjoy it. And then I read Only on the Weekends by Dean Atta, so another novel that is told in verse. This is a young adult book that follows 15-year-old Mac and the various changes going on in his life when he's a teenager. So we see him entering into his first relationship with another boy named Karim, and I found that a really nuanced relationship to follow, particularly with regards to the different relationships that each of these boys have to their sexuality. So Mac has been out as gay for quite a while, whereas Karim is not fully out to everyone, and in many ways he's trying to keep his relationship with Mac a secret. And I thought the author did a really fantastic job of having nuance in that experience, because even though you can see that Karim wanting to keep the relationship a secret is really hurtful to Mac, you do understand that he is a 15-year-old himself who is just trying to figure things out. I think it would be very easy for an author with a more indelicate pen to paint Karim as a bit of a villain there, and that's definitely not the case. The other complication in their relationship is that Mac's dad is a very well-known film director, and he gets a job working up in Scotland, which obviously creates distance between the two teenage boys, and that adds lots of complications to their relationship, especially when Mac meets someone else when he's in Scotland and is trying to navigate the complicated feelings around being attracted or having romantic feelings for two people at the same time, especially when that person he meets is very comfortable in their sexuality. So that kind of freedom is something that Mac is really drawn to. I found all the aspects of those teenage relationships really interesting to read about. What I also found really interesting was the relationship between Mac and his father, and how oftentimes they struggle to see things from one another's point of view and they misunderstand each other. And I thought how that relationship developed was really beautifully done. It also obviously touches on what it's like to have a parent that is somewhat in the spotlight or is well known. Dean Atta is the author of The Black Flamingo, which I read a few years and I absolutely loved. And he's another author that just uses the verse form spectacularly. I think it's such a beautiful form to be really kind of in someone's head, and it lends itself to doing things in a way differently to prose that I really enjoy. And that leads me really nicely into talking very briefly about the books that I read for work. So I read Gone for Good by Sarah Crossan, another really fantastic verse writer. I read Lessons in Death by Sophie Mackenzie, Robin by Sarah Ann Dukes, Drop Dead Famous by Jennifer Pearson, and Happy Hill's Cheesy Bob Strikes by Sophie Henn. So there we have it. They are all of the books that I read in November. Overall, I do think it was a really strong reading month. So far, my reading in December has been a little bit odd. I feel like in December, I've just been really struggling to kind of keep up with everything that's going on. But so far, I have read some really good books, so I'm looking forward to talking to you about those at the end of the month, in my final wrap-up of the year. If you want to let me know you're here, but you don't have anything in particular to say, can you leave me a train emoji? That is it for me today. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you in my next video.